30. Tragic his story only taught 10,000 years of strongmen dictators how to keep power. I'm asking for the same horror show's sharp lessons to teach citizen women and men to enlist everyone to work for our mass revolution. Teaching and enforcing love of all, uncorrupted democracy, and destruction of his power, genocidal weaponry. On March 13th, 2024, Hamas continued their 2 months of refusal to provide a list of surviving hostages, the only basis for any negotiations in consideration of their release. Ominously, they continued to say that hostages were dying of bombing and starvation. Likely enough, considering the tens of thousands blasted and starving just above those tunnels. Netanyahu then announced plans to soon finish off the rest, with months of direct attack into Hamas's last Rafah stronghold. Also, he stated intention to attack Hezbollah in Lebanon to capture their rockets, which drove border Israelis out of over 1,000 homes. Later, I'll recount more Mideast attack, counterattack recent cycles. Now, let's fly through all his story to make my case for destroying weapons to end war and tyrants' reigns, provided we also stop leader weaponeer conspiracy and fill public and adult schools with world love. For most of 10,000 years, tyrants seized money to pay huge armies and heavily arm them to crush their own people and other nations too. Each top dog and noble elite shouted nationwide patriotic hate of all who were merely different, and they sang out for the rebels' servile love of every boss and killer, all to gain public obedience far above that merely enforced at spear point or gunpoint, for passion to kill and die for the king. 100 years ago, weapons companies began winning giant contracts, with legislators and executives more powerful with taxes than all of history's deadliest emperors combined. World Wars I and II exploded. Then the first microsecond of American 1947 demobilization produced weaponeer seizure of my government to drive one nation's 50% share of 250 wars, 75-year rolling, conventional to nuclear World War III. Then in this century alone, 300 million of 100 centuries billion war dead were killed. I have covered the American post-World War II explosion of world conventional and potential nuclear war strongly initiated by massive politician bribery by weapons companies. But history's overwhelming pattern, even during the commercial weaponeering 20th and 21st centuries, was war dictator powerful executives dominating both appropriating legislatures and cooperative, if profiting, weapons companies. In all of history's cases, top elites empowered and enriched themselves with foreign and often domestic mass murder. The big bosses also grew giant and untouchable with power crushing of even favored groups, but especially inferior race, religion, and economic underclass castes. Their propaganda encourages favored group abuse of all despised, bullied losers. Theft plus weapons plus bigotry all fuel most wars, also crowning thousands of tyrannies seldom legally overthrown. Peace laws I promote would require our taxes to benefit, not harm us, and get rid of weapons and the war business, and school everyone possible out of bigotry and into love, respect, equality, and care, and kick all business and individual private influence out of government, and reinforce democratic equality wherever it has proven to be stolen. How else could billions gain self-government dedicated to saving, not destroying humanity, even as war and drought doomsdays rush close? Iran deposed their Shah, sick of his brutal military dictatorship enlarged with oil revenues, ever piling up American weapons inflicted upon his own people. But then in came the Ayatollah's theocracy, crushing all women's rights and breaking down anyone's door to bust them for a bottle of wine or a rock and roll tape. As always, a million underlings with automatic weapons enforced the tyranny. Enter Iraq's Saddam Hussein, exploding another oil-fattened army, brutalizing, crushing, but also whipping up his people with glorious lies about hideous, evil, inferior enemies you must kill, even at the cost of your own lives. Exactly as trumpeted and savaged by every military dictator in history, with absolute power over millions of soldiers, weapons, and dollars. Of course, he then invaded Iran for years, killing millions, at worst with hideous illegal chemical weapons. Of course, the equally empowered and mentally, morally ill American World War government weapons fueled most of the slaughter. Saddam was stinking evil and dangerous, but Khomeini's war on women, culture, and freedom appeared even worse. The USA did not pick and supply sides in just certain wars. Our companies sold to and exploded virtually all of hundreds of often decades-long conflicts. The worst world slaughter for a decade, Saudi Arabia's endless bombing of Yemen with American bombs has killed 150,000, maimed several hundred thousand, and starved to death 350,000. Another domestic rebellion in Syria during the same period, crushed by the megalomaniacal monster Hafez Assad with barrels of TNT full of nails dropped on multi-millions of domestic innocents out of helicopters, approaches 1 million slaughtered. Russia, China, and other international TNT marketers happily supply his explosive, and only our treaty would prohibit a nation close to 100% making buildings of cheap concrete from buying billions of nails, millions of barrels, and millions of tons of TNT useful for genocide, nothing else. The USA hates Iran too much to send him a bullet, but hey, that's what Russia and China are for. So Khomeini eventually repelled Saddam's invaders back home. Only your treaty will embargo every weapon exporting nation and domestic war machine fueling business until they all go out of business, totally ending foreign and civil war, obviously. Tyrants, or just businesses selling weapons to their tyrant pawns, explode war, hell on earth, then humanity's end. Your treaty eventually forces every mega-arsenal business dictator to proceed towards democracy and disarmament just to join our treaty, losing most world business, banking, and resource support until they do. We won't withhold food, water, and medicine, but we'll tempt them with fabulous recovery to make their incensed, desperate masses happy with their leaders again, when they wise up and join us, of course. Until then, dictators everywhere will ever seize, grow, and inflict armies with giant arsenals, attacking inside and often far outside of their nations. Other mega powers pretend democracy while fully corrupting most every executive, legislator, and judge by elevating their weapons industries to the world-raping, human safety and survival dooming moon. All such tyrannies boom national and worldwide propaganda, that glorious utopia of only the select, superior, and deserving can only be achieved by force, not in the least compromising our moral superiority that most fools and victims should volunteer to obey, but don't. Such breathtaking ego doesn't even blink. Their justifying message, rarely 5% different than Adolf Hitler's, is elevation of our superior master race over inferior breeds, religions, and nations, deserving only enslavement, destruction, and death. At worst, women and gays top their enemies' lists of our holy religions, often forcing government theocracy rammed through and hopefully far beyond the nation. My dream is you send dictators so many of my tapes that they get worried and listen. Then look up with wide eyes and say, "Oops, got my number." Virtually identical inhumanity bursts upon all points of the rabid right to loony left political anti-democratic bullies' extremes. In every single case, for all his story, unlimited weapons, money, and dictatorial political power concentrated to a small elite and commander-in-chief beholden to and building each other against the 99% foreign and domestic enemy. Exactly why and how 99.9% of afflicted planets quickly, completely died. Unlimited power. The two books that ignited my "your power over theirs" rocket at 13, barely before my 47-year addict's hiatus and pathetic surrender, were The Limits of Power by Senator Eugene McCarthy, Vietnam anti-war presidential candidate, and The Arrogance of Power by Senator J. William Fulbright, the wise man who said, "Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely." Retitle my speeches about your laws of and for humanity and survival, "Our Limits, government that we govern so it doesn't eat us." I'm looking into a mental disorder that falsely believes good friends bad, then fears and accuses them of that evil. I suspect that such paranoia and imagination of persecution, dangerously activated by deadly financial, technological opportunities, utterly ungoverned by desperately needed law, twisted beyond original fear of and defense against truly dangerous predators' instinct, plus horrid to survive drive, pathologically twisted to top 1% aggressors' war motivations, egged on by ignorance of universal human worth, bigotry instead, anti-education, they then explosively flogged through 8 billion other soon equally sickened minds. Please get experts to evaluate and deal with my every utterly amateur flailing. Now, my conspiracy against all of those world-conquering and destroying nutballs, my dream, is forcing our new national and world laws to stop our public, soon family murder. My scheme, however, dies forever fast without you interneting a zillion. Like giant napalm fireballs bursting through a fireworks factory. Every group that must push our laws faces the complex and endless job of persuading and legally coercing their rapid expansion and adoption throughout the world, never successfully without ever educated, motivated, and organized new help that you must inspire with your outreach. No wonder only mandatory world schooling and communication finally wins our new world. FYI, the only world that can survive. My speeches are 30% history and 60% reasoning, ethics, and urgency. Expansion by others I'll beg for every day I'm alive. Today I traced history that might be used to scheme a list of lawful steps towards human safety. Concentrate on the toughest job first, destroying weapons. Not only is every war 99% ended when both fighting groups are down to 1/100th of their original arsenal, but national leaders not permitted such monstrous militaries, often including giant secret police forces, to turn on their own people, then military dictator tyrants and civil wars too will be history. His story ended. Bye-bye, bad boys. Bad boys, what you gonna do when we come for you? Why did you have to act so mean? Don't you know you're a human being? Born of a mother with the love of a father. Reflection comes and reflection goes. We know sometimes you wanna let go, but now you gonna hate, you gonna hurt no more. Good boys, good boys. Unfortunately, bombs, guns, and national and world attack armies are not nearly the full scheme and evil achievement of tyrannies. Consider the mass power of money and propaganda for full population hate and aggression to clear the decks for every scorched earth despot's agenda. Stupid and gullible is any population with scant public education teaching equal worth of all races, nations, and beliefs, regardless of great fondness for our proud versions. Ready to die and kill too is every country with its own tradition of certain groups lording it over others, full of suckers for hate propaganda, always furthering the biggest bully's ambitions. Fund that toxic brew with unlimited money invited as gifts to politicians, or handed over by rich oligarchs needing government favor. Now pour those millions into TV ads to twist every angry mind and vote to elect them and endorse their every domestic and foreign war. In my America, through each of our last 80 years, such propaganda has never stopped cementing 90% leader and follower support and funding of weaponry demands for world war, destroying many and most soon, then their own families too. Democracy only begun with the freedom, physical and mental, to think and voice ideas of our own, never others' lies and hate to get them our money. Freedom only consistent and possible with preservation of equal freedom and treasured, not denied worth of all citizens and all foreigners too. But democracy 100% dies with the 100% murder, final death of our human minds and hearts. Not to mention public decency ethics, our souls polluted, hearts blackened with bigoted, elitist, warmongering propaganda. All bought with the highest courts claimed free speech, if you got extra money, that is, to buy ads for your favorite sweet and trash-talking politicians, whose next message is invariably, buy me a giant army to enforce hate, dictatorship, and war. For every one nation led by war merchant politician bribes for massive government contracts, another 10 are directly dominated by prejudiced, power-mad, power-taking leaders with all the total cash control needed to propagandize formerly loving citizen humans into nasty sheep, loosing the lordly loony to hammer endless war upon all humanity. I hear your question. Which are you, Steve? Sneaky or obsessed? Every horror you detail can only be fixed by ripping every private money root of all evil entirely out of our public government's topsoil. After getting that done, to drown every hate and war megaphone and us yelling into the breach for disarmament, you can't be satisfied until we fill every school with so much national and worldwide love, respect, and collaboration that even hate and war screamers on every channel couldn't touch our gigantic new human minds and hearts. Worst case, we screw up and elect the bozos anyway. Good thing we already made them disarm. Now their dirty minds and mouths couldn't hurt a flea if they wanted to. Then we sit them down for a little talk. Would you fellas want to be even remotely competitive next election? You've about lost millions of voters terrified of their own damn water faucets going dry. Your opponents voice plans to spend war trillions on piping ocean steam and coastal floods to our lakes, about to drop not low, but frickin' dry. Only your scheme to do it better, cheaper, and faster with your insider expertise and growing legislative support could possibly pop you over 50% in the general election. Steve, you're only a loose wingnut until I take over. Then look out, world, here we come. Hey, thanks. About time I got your earful, listener. Don't I need to stop my scribbling and screaming and get you what I got before rearm Zelensky pokes 5,000 H-bomb Putin in the eye? Useless me gotta turn this over to you now. Tell American and Ukrainian leaders to fortify, not blast through front lines. Then wangle a stalemate ceasefire that heals all sides with all options open except surrender of anybody's territory, mostly just held at far higher tragic cost for 8 years anyway. Then incentivize negotiations to minimize abuse and maximize well-being of all Ukraine, even under occupation. This ain't rocket science. Peace queer pun. Get it? Besides the disarmament and public campaign finance only legal war I never stop inciting, You help write and file federal and international lawsuits demanding present constitutional or world law enforced, or newly desperately needed to advance. No longer destroy human general welfare by destroying, not any more advancing, our crises of industrial and government making. Are not bribe money and genocide prepared for absolutely present and impending further infliction, plus utter neglect of public duty to defend our lives with new water and food as urgently needed? Only total theft for murderous wars dooming us all against all Constitution drafters, every written order? Please, my expert listeners, write all those laws for legislators to approve, too, because courts probably can't take over their power to appropriate our rescue, which they will if our movement threatens their jobs if they don't. Once you negotiate our same laws into citizen-designed mock world treaties, hit presidents and state departments to shuttle their expert, executive-approved treaty improvements around to their 194 world counterparts. Now all you big shots prep the real deal for every president's autograph, national ratification, and everybody's whoopee. Remember, actual policy, reform, and big project beginning is required just to be considered as a treaty signatory. Close to 16 dozen actionless liars signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which got us all nowhere exactly as its toothless PR intended. You world economy experts get busy scheming the positive incentives and total devastating embargo threats and reality to convince holdouts to join. Science pros take over our water projects. Didn't some commie say, "From each according to his abilities, to each according to his needs"? Let's add to every great arsenal ever built was used in total for 1 billion murders, pending all of our 8 billion more. We'll stop this only by destroying, unbuilding those arsenals, obviously. Great Middle East dictators collected oil wealth into their personal control, bought monstrous murder power, and slaughtered millions. Hamas and other revolutionaries chafing under Israel's occupation and oppression imported Iranian rockets for decades and rained them on Israel, deliberately cementing in decades more Jewish hatred and endless revenge, saying, "Screw our peon citizens' liberty, long as we're armed and powered and well paid to hate, attack, and kill." And haven't you noticed that while Netanyahu's regime crushed his high court and low people, millions screaming in the streets for democracy, peace, and a lawful executive, the big guy said exactly the same. "Screw my peon citizens' liberty and wishes, long as we few bosses are armed and powered and well paid to hate and kill." Send that exact plaque to every dick potato who ever lived for his ear-to-ear leer and... For decades, peaking this year, Israel periodically killed thousands of Palestinians with American bombs. The massive Lebanese Hezbollah militia gets hundreds of thousands of Iranian missiles certain to be used in full-scale war on Israel, who announced plans to begin that very war soon after February 13th, 2024. your Speech 30 recording day. Yemeni Houthi rebels have shipped in thousands of drone bombers and continue flinging most against Red Sea international shipping. Misdirected aggression in sympathy with terrorized Palestinians. So American bombing of Houthis in defense of world commerce now trends as permanent as all Mideast escalation, only headed ever higher. Both the Mideast and Ukraine swirl in 100 weaponeer nation plus half-dozen superpower geysers. Double monster world toilet flushing us all down to our doom. Massive North Korean resupply, 1 million artillery shells about to overwhelm a mere 90-day radical Republican hiccup in American explosive fueling dooms Zelensky's frontline troops. But even our 1 million shell counter in time still murders every single Ukrainian soldier within a year or so, leaving surviving Russian hordes left to rampage. Weaponized tit for tat, leaders heartlessly pouring all grown children cannon fodder in until gone. Ever booms, never ends. If we deny seeing impending doomsday, that is. Only your laws can replace power, revenge, hell with love and help returned heaven. Weapon murder law of the human jungle only boils down to a few numbers. How many weapons, how powerful, kill how many people, for how long? Answer: forever, as long as you permit dirty money to buy them and you permit truly filthy non-law to keep and explode every single one on us all. Military pros and well-paid partisan political advisors scheme out these millions to billions of murders with pretty much the same plan and objective. Good advice to my superpower government for endless more foreign warring. We'll try for victories, although invading angry populations in this century eventually fails 90% of the time. So it's a good thing that our bottom line is just permanent, massive weapons company profits poured into our re-election TV lies quid pro quo. Lose the wars later, win every election now. Money and power, baby. Some superpowers do fight to win and conquer only. Their total power leaders' elections and long careers never in doubt. All great powers thrive on massive foreign wars, content with massive civilian slaughter, dozens of times easier than hugely difficult defeat of big, high-tech, heavily armed, or desperate home defenders. Evidently fast approaching conventional explosion to nuclear doomsday troubles them not. They just hope that holds off until, still enriched and retired at 75, their fat, cold hearts explode just before the rest of us all do. Well, you and I are going to get a message to them power dudes. Boys, you ain't going to make it half that long before killing your own honey and kids. So wise up and turn your expertise over a new leaf to join us peace warriors unbuilding your horror. Repent. Steal, hate, and kill no more. Why don't you love and save us all, including you, smarty pants? Damn, I'm wound up and out of control like Jim Carrey's green, leering mask. I whirl to a halt with a toothy, frozen smirk. Somebody stop me!